just as the National Assembly is ramping up activities to end the year, President Bola Tinubu presents the budget proposals for 2025.
Our 2025 budget proposal is not just another statement on projected government revenue and expenditure.
The first reaction to the presentation happened right on the floor of the Green Chamber as lawmakers chant the President's Solidarity song. Tagged Budget of Restoration, Securing Peace and Rebuilding Prosperity, lawmakers react to some of the indices and allocations in the proposal.
Based on the parameters we have used in the medium-term expenditure framework, the inflation rate will reduce from over 35 to about 15%. That is to show that the GDP is also going to grow.
Defense have about 4.7 trillion. Infrastructure, 4.7 trillion. Education and health put together about 5.7 trillion. This is the highest so far we have gotten in any budget of the Federal Republic. We haven't gotten this amount in capital development before.
The presentation is coming days to the end of the year, and that will affect the January to December cycle for the budget implementation. This elicits some reactions from the lawmakers as well.
There is no way, there is no magic wand that will make it possible for the National Assembly to pass the budget this year. And even next year, it has to be probably first week or second week of February.
You all agree with me with what we saw today that the president is doing well, the administration is doing very, very well. Look at the report from our Bureau of Statistics that the economy is picking up. I think we are presently at about 3.5%. From the numbers, it's looking good.
Shortly after the joint session, the Senate reconvened plenary to give legislative backing to the extension of the 2024 budget.
A bill for an act to amend the 2024 Appropriation Act in order to extend the implementation year from 31st day of December 2024 to 30th day of June 2025 and for related matters 2024. Third reading taken and passed.
The extension of the life of the budget will give the lawmakers ample time to do thorough work on the 2025 budget proposals, albeit at the expense of the January to December budget cycle. From the National Assembly, Benny Ark for Channels Television News.
Well, joining us now to take a look at the 2025 budget proposal and a host of other issues is Honorable Bamidele Salam, who is the Chairman House Committee on Public Accounts in the House of Representatives. Honorable, welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much, Mobe. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. Well, we've now been cleared that it is 49.7 trillion naira as opposed to 47.9 that we had thought the president was presenting. Well, here we have this figure, 49.7 trillion naira. You heard the general, the allocation as the president has earmarked certain amounts to certain areas. His broad, his broad aims in the 2025 budget. He hopes that inflation will taper down to at least 15% from where we currently are. He's hoping that the exchange rate will also fall. For you, looking at this budget and also chairing the the Public Accounts Committee, what are your thoughts? Do you think that these aims are achievable?
Well, thank you very much, Mobe. Let me start off by saying that every budget presentation is an expression of intent. It's an expression of a vision of where we want to take the country in the next fiscal year. And the intentions, as enunciated in the speech by Mr. President yesterday, are quite good. They are quite noble. In some instances, they are very ambitious. For example, the intention or the vision of the government to bring down inflation by almost 50% from the current 34.6% to 15% looks very, very good. The intention to increase or reduce importation of refined petroleum products and then increase the export of same, is very remarkable. These are all very good intent. But like you rightly said, there's a huge gap between having very clear goals, intentions, and aspirations, and faithful implementation of same to attain the desired result. And that is where the problem also comes in. The problem always comes at the point of fiscal discipline. We've been able to, stick to the numbers and the goals and the general, matrix of our budget for implementation. And this is not just a recent thing. For the past 5, to 10 years, we have had issues with implementation of budget in a manner that will make us able to access how far we have moved from point A to point B, as a country. Let me give you an instance, for example. For example, we had also an aspiration last year that we were going to be able to bring down inflation to about 20-something%. On the contrary, inflation rose to 34.6% in the current year. Now, the problems, the major constitutive factor of rise in inflation in Nigeria is the high cost of food. And high cost of food is as a result of insecurity in most of the communities where these foods are produced, where they are grown, as well as the very poor infrastructure, especially road infrastructure, which hampers transportation of farm produce from the place of production to the place of consumption. So this is just one example of our failure to adhere to the basic principles of budget and be able to, at the end of every year, say, okay, we are going to tick these boxes as some of the accomplishments that we have been able to, to attain in a particular fiscal year. So on a general note, the budget is ambitious, looks good, well, subject to having the details of the specific project, for example, that the federal government intends to fix with the 4-point-something trillion naira appropriated to infrastructure. Until we are able to see those details and then able to compare them with what has been done in the previous year, it will be very difficult, for us to be able to say, oh yes, we're actually moving forward.
I'm very happy that you mentioned agricultural production, and the president mentioned it briefly. He says increasing agricultural production is central to our food security agenda, but insecurity has crippled this vital sector. Those are the president's words. He says we're supporting our farmers with funding and inputs to reignite productivity. Food security is non-negotiable. I'm just wondering whether for you, when you look at the fact that there are many of the sectors, he mentioned how much was being allocated, but to the agric sector, no specific amount was mentioned, and it would seem that that was all that was mentioned in agriculture, an admittance that, is being crippled. The vital sector has been crippled. Was that enough for you?
Thank you very much, Mabe. I agree absolutely with you. I would have expected that we will have specific figures in the budget speech, even though the budget details currently before the National Assembly will have those details. But for the benefit of the optics and for driving home the point that this is one of the sectors that is being targeted to drive the attainment of the goals of the budget, I would have expected that the president will give specific figures of what is allocated of this 49 trillion naira to the agricultural sector. Apart from that, Maube, talking about infrastructure, saying that you have this sum of 4-point-something trillion naira, voted to infrastructure. Infrastructure is a very, very wide field. Infrastructure, you're talking about roads, you talk about railway, you talk about power, you talk about, other tangible assets and drivers of the economy. I would have also expected that we will have the specifics of what government intends to spend on this area. But having said that, I also want to say that one other good thing about, the speech is the president dwelling a lot about education. I've always advocated that if we are intentional about combating insecurity, combating poverty, the place of education must be given, primary attention, must be given a lot of focus by government. And I'm happy that the president in the speech specifically mentioned a sum of almost 1 trillion naira dedicated to the school infrastructure, and a sum of 3.5 trillion naira that will be, that has been allocated to the education sector to be able to get our kids back to school, reduce out-of-school children, enhance the quality of our teachers, and address other major problems confronting the education sector. Because, like I said, if we are intentional about solving most of these problems, the place of education is primary in whatever we do. But like I've said, I would have expected the same attention and details to be given on agriculture, because this is another very, very important area. When we are able to provide food for our people, when we are able to solve food security, social insecurity and other forms of insecurity will invariably also be addressed by government.
I want to be able to stay on education with you because I'm seeing this, the Public Accounts Committee, which is what you chair, is asking that NECO, UI, Ministry of Labor and 21 others be removed from the 2025 budget. Could you talk to us a little bit about why this is important?
Well, again, the purpose of a budget, like I said, is to drive economic growth. And our laws and systems have also put in place measures through which we can track implementation of budget and judicious expenditure of monies appropriated by the National Assembly or generated as internal revenue by ministry, department, and agency. Now, the Public Account Committee, as a constitutional committee of the House, has a mandate to ensure accountability, to ensure probity, to ensure efficiency in the use of resources allocated to this ministry, department, and agency. Unfortunately, we have had a situation where some agencies of government have become recalcitrant, refusing to honor invitation, refusing to honor summons, refusing to appear to account for previous allocations given to them in federal budget, some in 2020, 2021, 2022. And one of the penalties specified by the Financial Regulations 2009 and other enabling laws on issue of accountability in Nigeria is that ministries, departments, or agencies that refuse to account for monies appropriated by the National Assembly or refuse to honor invitation to render those accounts can be delisted from further funding. And that is exactly what the Public Accounts Committee did by reviewing, the last few months, the last 13 months, and looking at those ministry departments and agencies that have consistently refused to honor invitation or even submit documents which will, authenticate their judicious and lawful use of resources previously allocated. So I think for those, one of the appropriate measures as stipulated by regulation is to stop further, funding for them, so that we can know how, this. Let me give you one example of the National Examination Council, NECO. The NECO has been given invitations up to 5 times by the Public Account Committee. They have neither responded to any of the invitations nor physically attended any of the summons. Same with every other agency, 24 of them listed in that resolution that was passed by the Public Account Committee, as a recommendation for the listing of these agencies from further funding. So it's just an application of the rules specified in our laws and our regulations to ensure that we don't just play with these figures saying we are allocating these sums of money. We have to have value for money. The ones we allocated previously, how were they spent? How much value do we have for the quantum of funds that we have allocated to each of these sectors? And that is what the National Assembly is asking these agencies to come and explain, to come and speak to, which unfortunately they have refused to do for so many months. And then this is a measure of last resort to ensure that they act in a manner that is lawful, in a manner that is constitutional, in a manner that is also globally, acceptable. It is an acceptable practice all over the world that you must have an evaluation, you must have a review process, you must have an auditing process to ensure that monies that are allocated to agencies are spent for the purpose for which they are spent, and they are spent in the manner for which they are required to be spent.
Well, I'm sure you'll be keeping tabs on that particular topic, and we'll be following you to see, how it all unfolds. I want to switch gears a little bit, still talking about the budget, though, to some of the things that President Bola Tinubu said. One of the things that he talked about was this is not the time for lamentations. Time for lamentations are over, and it's time for action. And then he kept talking about believing in the resilience of the Nigerian people.
Now, this budget is supposed to create some 34.82% revenue, supposed to generate that much revenue in 2025, and the reduction of inflation.
I will certainly reconnect to that connection, that conversation, a very, very important one, no doubt, talking about the budget aspirations. And of course, you know that there's been some reaction. The conversation we're having with Honorable Bamidele there is one that is really quite curious. One of the questions that I'm hoping I'll be able to ask him when the time comes is how useful, how functional is the statement, the report. Okay, so Honorable, let me quickly ask you, how useful, going by what you said, I'm sure that Kayla is going to circle back to you on the question she has in mind, but how useful are the reports of the Senate committee, the reports of your committee, the Public Accounts Committee? How useful are your reports to the decision-making process of the National Assembly?
All right. The Public Accounts Committee, as I'm sure that you know, is the creation of the Nigerian Constitution. And one of the things we do as a committee, after all the review of the Auditor General's report, as well as other issues on financial infractions and non-adherence to laws and regulation of finances, is to lay this report before the House. And the usefulness of the report, unfortunately, also will depend on how much the executive arm of government holds this report with seriousness. Now, because we are lawmakers, we are legislators, the powers of implementation of laws and regulations also lie with the executive. Unlike what happens in some other countries, for example, with our sister countries, talking about the public account committees in some other countries, there is a public account committee implementation tribunal, which is set up for the purpose of implementing the recommendations of the public account. Unfortunately, we don't have such in Nigeria. So at the end of all this exercise of considering reports, passing resolutions on this report, we still send this report to the executive arm of government. And, it's the executive arm of government now that is supposed to use this report for the purpose of enhancing its internal audit system, enhancing its framework of expenditure, and improving on the budgeting processes in subsequent years. Now, that is the intention of the framework of having the Public Account Committee. But like I've told you, whether that happens or not is not so much about the legislature, but rather about the executive. And one of the things that we are set to do, which we are doing now, is to ensure that those who do not use the report or the recommendations, or who do not yield to the demand of the law, have sanctions applied against them. Well, one of the sanctions is this delisting from further budgetary allocation, which we have recommended, to the House of Representatives, to consideration of the 2025, appropriation bill before us now.
And that is quite curious. It's actually the reason that question was put out, because if an agency of government does not do the needful, and the same agency is asking for more money after having not done the needful, then questions ought to be asked. Now, this has continued for many years. What do you think is the major impediment? Because at the end of the day, as you know, if you say it's not a function of the National Assembly, I'm wondering exactly how else this can be approached. Because if the executive is not doing anything about it, and it is the National Assembly that makes the law, that appropriates the law, the appropriation law that the president is going to execute in the year 2025. Are you saying that even the National Assembly is helpless? You can't delist these people from these agencies, from the budget, from the legislative process level?
Okay, now I wanted to get it right. I'm not saying the National Assembly is helpless. The National Assembly's powers, as provided for again in the Constitution and enabling laws, allows imposition of sanctions, one of which is the issue of the list that I've spoken about. But when you look at the major problem that affects our budget implementation process is lack of discipline. We just have so much fiscal indiscipline in a number of our structures and institutions. We have structures and institutions that spend money without appropriation. We have those that spend money above appropriation. We have those who violate provisions of the Procurement Act, for example, in the implementation of the process. Now, there is no small infraction when it comes to the issue of going against the law. If you do one, if you do two, if you do 10, we still regard you as being in contempt of the law. Unfortunately, most of these agencies are also playing very critical role in the social economic firmament. I'll give you another example. The Department of Information and Communication Technology of the Nigeria Police Force has been invited for up to 5 or 6 times, based on the Auditor General's report of 2020, which which identified several infractions, financial infractions, in the implementation of the 2020 budget. Now, that's the Department of ICT in the Nigeria Police Force. As we speak, they have neither written nor appeared to defend that. Now, if you go ahead and apply the big stick, as it were, and say, okay, yeah, there's no further funding for you, imagine how that will also hamper the effectiveness and the performance of the important role of the police, because that is a very critical unit that drives the technology of the Nigeria Police Force. So in applying these sanctions, the National Assembly also tries to find a balance in a manner that will not also impede effective delivery of an important service, social service, economic service to the Nigerian people. So it is in finding this balance that we then have this dilemma of what do we do? We just talked about like the University of Ibadan. The University of Ibadan was also invited. They didn't appear. Now, the University of Ibadan, as an academic institution, has specific mandate, which cannot also, be carried out without fund. So we do hope that these 24 agencies, for example, will make themselves available. The Public Account Committee has made itself available, even during the holiday period, to come and defend the various, cited by the Auditor General and other financial issues, so that they may, after all, be considered for further funding in the 2025 budget. Because, like I've said, we do not also want to grind the operation of government. We do not want to also do things that will impede these agencies. Look at the National Health Insurance Agency and the service that this agency renders to the vulnerable and the poor people of Nigeria. Yet, they are one of the agencies that have refused severally to appear to account for money spent to them. So we do always look, for the balance in this area. But as for us in the Public Account Committee, the job that has been given to us by the Constitution, by the laws of Nigeria, we will do in a manner that will ensure that Nigeria, is globally competitive when it comes to the issue of transparency, accountability, and financial discipline.
I'm looking forward to what maybe the civil society organizations or maybe even the courts will be able to do something about that, because accountability is at the core of public service, one would expect. But then looking at all of the issues that have been raised, your party has come out to say, as far as the PDP is concerned, this budget of the president is unrealistic. Some say it's ambitious. As an officer in the National Assembly, which is it for you?
Well, let me say that when we work in the National Assembly, we do not work as political party helpsmen, so to say. I respect the views of my political party. They have made their position known, and I will leave that to the spokesperson of the political party to express the position of the party. But as a lawmaker who has sworn to an oath to defend the Constitution of Nigeria, to defend the interests of the electorate and the people of Nigeria, I do think that this budget offers some hope. This budget offers some ambitious indication, but it is one thing to have hope, it is one thing to have a vision, it is another thing to arrive at the desired destination. And the missing link, as I've said earlier, is lack of fiscal discipline. If the federal government of Nigeria can ensure that we have more fiscal discipline in 2025, we have more adherence to the laws and the rules and the regulations, and we are able to increase on our capacity. If government, for example, is able to even earn more money, I think the projection for revenue that government has. I can't remember what the figure is now. If we're able to work on even any more money than this, the federal government can bring in a supplementary budget in the course of the year, so that we can increase funding to this critical sector, education, health, agri, infrastructure, and what have you. But for now, I think it will be a little bit unfair, especially that we have not also looked at the details of this 2025 budget. To throw the budget away has been, a trash, as the political party said. But like I said, I respect the views of the party. The party spokesman is doing their job, and as a member of the National Assembly, who has sworn to defend the Nigerian Constitution and who listened to the speech of the president yesterday, I think the budget offers some hope. The budget offers some opportunities for us to have a new beginning, only and only if government will be determined, dedicated, and disciplined to walk the talk as contained in the president's budget speech and in the actual document itself, which the House of Reps will begin to debate today as the bill comes for the second reading.
I mean, Honorable, we lost the connection with you at the time. I don't know if you heard most of what the question I asked was, which was about the things that the president was talking about yesterday. He kept talking about the resilience of the Nigerian people, talking about how much revenue was going to be generated from this budget. I said, this is not the time for lamentations, it's the time for actions. Now, juxtaposing the figures and the breakdowns really that we're seeing of this budget with the expectations of government and then the expectations of the Nigerian people, do you see these things working out, especially for the Nigerian people in 2025?
All right. Like I said earlier, very beautiful speech by Mr. President. It was inspiring, so to say. And I look forward to the details of the budget. I will expect, for example, that some of the key provisions in this budget, especially on offering social safety nets to the poor and to the vulnerable members of the Nigerian public, will be more general than we had in previous years. I am aware that the federal government is trying to create a national social safety register, which will make the implementation of the social security programs more scientific, more data-driven, which is one of the things that we lack in the past. We do not know who gets what. We do not know, how these things are channeled. And I do hope when we get to sit down to look at the details of the budget, that there will be, a very reasonable proportion of provision for the humanitarian ministry, for example, for the National Emergency Management Agency, for the Commission for Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons, and for some other agencies of government that deal with addressing the current the economic dislocation, social dislocations that we have all over the country. And like I said earlier on too, fixing the issue of out-of-school children is very, very, very critical. We cannot continue to have these numbers of out-of-school children in all parts of the country, especially in the northeast and the northwestern part of the country, and expect that we can combat insecurity, combat poverty, and combat other ills successfully. It just will not work. I do hope that the figures will actually, be such that will translate into tangible results, so that by the time we are doing a review of the 2025 budget, we will be able to say, oh yes, the president delivered a very beautiful speech, an inspiring speech, and he has taken us from the point we were as of January of 2025 to a more progressive and more sustainable destination in December of the same year. I do really hope that we'll be able to say that at the end of the year.
That we notice, well, it happens almost every year with the budget, at least in recent years, that defense always takes the bulk of the budget. And many people have always tried to ask, so what's the money being used for? Is it actually making the impact that it's supposed to make after taking the bulk of our budget? Is there a breakdown necessary?
Yeah, to be very fair and to be very candid and fair to men and women of the armed forces and the security agencies, I think the lion's share allocation to that ministry is justifiable, is necessary, and has impacted on their operations in the previous years. I mean, we can all see the figures. Things are not as terrible as they were, especially as it has to do with the issue of insurgency and militant operations in the northern part of the country, in the southeastern part of the other part of the country. There is no doubt that we have a reduction. But whether that reduction is enough is another question. All that we need to do, which I hope that the president has incorporated in the budget, is number one, increase the manpower of the Nigerian police force, increase the capacity of the police force. We cannot continue to expect that it is the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy that will continue to be involved in all internal security operations all over the country. We have the police, we have the civil defense, which, if well equipped, well trained, well motivated, can take care of the issues that we have in most parts of the country, so that our armed forces will be more committed and trained and focused on defending the territorial integrity of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I think it is an abnormal today that in situations where you have even ordinary communal clashes, we cannot tackle them until we bring in soldiers and military men, things that ordinarily the police should be able to do. And the two things that are lacking, or three things that are lacking to my mind: manpower. The second one has to do with the equipment that they have, and lastly, the training, which is by far the most important thing. What kind of the quality of the manpower that we develop in our security agencies? We do not just recruit men into the police and the other security agencies on the basis of sentiment, somebody bringing in a slot from here, somebody nominating somebody from here. It doesn't work that way. You only get what you give. It's garbage in, garbage out. The quality of the manpower is such that must reflect capacity, must reflect the intent of the person going into the security forces as somebody who actually wants to go and lay down his or her life in defense of his fellow countrymen.
Honorable, as we wind down now, I'd like you to also comment on the subject of corruption, because implied in Kela's statement when she was asking for a breakdown is that to be able to measure impact, we need to know what it is, where our money really is going. And the president did admit, in number 31 of this speech, he says our nation faces existential threats from corruption and insecurity and suffers from many past poor choices. From what you have seen so far, do you think that we actually have the machinery in place to be able to combat corruption, which the president has identified as an existential threat?
Yes, in terms of the structures, we have the structures. We have the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit. We have the structures. What we lack is a synergy among those structures, and importantly also, and I did say this in one of the engagement we have with the Office of the Auditor General for the Federation, that as a country, if we focus more of our attention on preventing this theft of public funds, preventing wastage, preventing corruption in these organs of government, we will have saved ourselves a lot of trouble trying to go after the money after they have been stolen. It will interest you to know that the EFCC chairman said this recently. When we hear all these several billions of naira recovered by the EFCC, they are just like a drop in the ocean in the quantum of funds that are either misappropriated, misapplied, or outrightly stolen. If you vote 10 naira for any project in Nigeria, you'll be very lucky to have 6-7 naira actually spent on that project. So if we are able to strengthen the Office of the Auditor General for the Federation, which in most other jurisdictions is the supreme audit institution that is empowered to prevent fraud. If you can have up to 50% prevention, you will do less work even trying to prosecute people spending so many years in court, hiring senior advocate of Nigeria, spending money, and then you are confronting people that also have billions and trillions of naira who can hire 10 SAM, who can do so many things to frustrate the case. Unfortunately, the Auditor General's office, as we speak, apart from the specific provision of the Nigerian Constitution which creates that office, does not have an audit law. The audit law has been going, the audit bill has been going back and forth in the past 10, 12 years has not been passed. We do hope that this time around the House of Reps has passed it. We do hope that the Senate will pass it very soon, and that the President will be gracious enough to accede to an audit bill, which is a bill that will strengthen the audit capacity of that office, and invariably also help us to prevent most of these corrupt practices in our public expenditure. If we do that, I think we'll have solved a very good part of the problem we are confronting.
How quickly do you think this bill will be passed? This appropriation bill?
Well, I do hope that by February it should be possible, because the Speaker of the House of Reps has charged us to make sure that we cut short our Christmas and New Year break. And even during the break, I know that there are some committees that will continue to engage with the relevant MDAs to consider their budgetary proposals. So, give and take, I'm looking at by February we shall have a budget properly called.
All right, February, we will certainly keep a date with the members of the National Assembly. We have to thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Honorable Bamidele Salam is the Chairman, House Committee on Public Accounts. Compliments of the season to you.
Thank you. I wish you the same. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I do believe that this conversation around the budget will continue on Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. So please do not go away, or we'll take a break and be back.